Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Elevation with Palesa. We are back with another topic, and today's topic is called trauma bonding. So, today, ladies and gentlemen, the topic is called trauma bonding. So, for those of you guys who don't know what trauma bonding is, it's basically a psychological response between the victim and the perpetrator. So it's a connection whereby the victim forms this unhealthy bond with the abuser, with the perpetrator. So trauma bonds come in different kinds of forms. They are caused because of different kinds of reasons. They start because of different purposes or different reasons or different occurrences. But there is something called trauma bonding, guys. So I'm just talking about this because I know that a lot of people find themselves in these kind of connections, or they found themselves in these kind of connections and they're trying to heal from that, or some of them are currently in that connection but they are not aware that they're actually in a trauma bonding connection. So trauma bonding, guys, it happens, it's like a cycle of abuse. So it's when the abuser mistreats the victim, treats them badly, abuses them in different kinds of ways, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically. But still, the victim still feels the need to actually still be part of that connection. Why? Because they feel attached to the abuser. They feel like they cannot survive without the abuser being in their lives, especially if they've been together for a very long time. Or they feel attached to their abusers. They feel like, okay, I've known this person for 5, 6, 7 years, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 years, even 6 months, even 3 months. They feel like they've been so heavily attached to this person that they cannot see life without them. So they end up staying in that relationship even while they're being mistreated. So that is trauma bonding, guys. So there's I don't know if you guys are aware of a type of trauma bonding. It's called Stockholm syndrome. So Stockholm syndrome is when the victim starts feeling like remorse, sympathy, feeling sorry for the perpetrator for actually mistreating them, for not treating them well, for not giving them the care, the love, the nurturing that they actually deserve. The victim, start seeing themselves as the causes of how the perpetrator and the abuser is actually treating them. It's like a psychological distortion that is caused by the abuser, because the abuser keeps on treating them badly, and to them, according to the victim, they start looking at themselves as, what am I doing that's wrong? Why is he or she treating me the way he or she is treating me? Is it something that I'm doing that's not wrong? Is there something wrong with me that I need to start looking at? They start questioning themselves instead of actually looking at the victim and looking at the abuser and trying to actually realize why the abuser is treating them the way that they're treating them. So that is one of the types of trauma bondings that you can find. It's called Stockholm syndrome. Most of you guys probably have heard of it. So it's basically a victim just feeling sympathy, remorse, always trying to take the blame for the actions of the abuser. What causes trauma bonding? That's the question that I'd like to actually clarify. What causes trauma bonding amongst people? So number one, it's attachment issues. Number two, it's codependency issues. So just to elaborate on attachment issues, we are all human beings and humans survive on attachments. We survive on knowing that we've got a support structure, a group of people, a partner, family, friends, colleagues that will be able to be there for us when we need help. So trauma bonding starts from attachments. So for example, let's say like a baby and a mother. So when a baby's born, they attach to their mother. They depend on their mother to feed them food, to give them care, to give them love, to give them nurture, to give them all sorts of kind of support, because they're still a baby and they're still reliant on the mother. So that's a perfect example of attachment and being dependent on someone. And then another example would be a married couple. Both the partners are dependent on each other for support, for advice, for care, for love, for affection, and all those things. So that's a form of attachment and a form of being dependent. So when people are attached to each other, it's that thing of they're so used to having that person as a supportive structure that they cannot see themselves living without that person being there as a support structure. They feel like if that person leaves their lives, they won't be able to survive. Their lives will fall apart. That's what causes trauma bonding, whereby now a victim ends up staying in a very detrimental relationship, because they feel like they are attached to this person. And then codependency issues would be that they are reliant on their partners to give them support. They are reliant on their partners to give them love. They are reliant on their partners to give them support, so they cannot see themselves surviving without their partners. So because they are dependent on their partners to actually give them love, affection, care, support, and all of those things, they too dependent on them, that they cannot see themselves providing that for themselves. So even if they're getting bad treatment, even if their needs are not met, their emotional needs are not met, they're not receiving the love that they need, the care that they need, the nurture that they need, or whether they're getting breadcrumbed, whatever it is that they need. Maybe if they need love, they get given like a pinch of love. If they need affection, they get given a pinch of affection. If they need support, they get given a pinch of support. They still rely on the perpetrator, the abuser, to still provide them that, even though they're actually not receiving what they want, what they need fully. So that those are codependency issues. So that can cause a trauma bond between a partner and a partner, a married couple, or just a relationship, girlfriend and boyfriend, even between mother and child. A cycle is then formed within this trauma bond. A cycle is formed between the victim and the perpetrator. So the abuser keeps mistreating, the victim, keeps breadcrumbing the victim, keeps providing little or no emotional needs met for the victim. No love, no affection, no support. And the victim will still feel the need to actually beg the abuser to give them that, instead of removing themselves out of that situation. They still see the need to beg, to run after the abuser, to just, go on their knees, and worship the abusers to actually give them what they need as a human being, And the perpetrator is always manipulative. So they will do something bad to the victim, whether mistreat them emotionally, physically, psychologically, and then they'll then manipulate the whole situation to make it seem as if the victim is the one that's doing wrong, that's causing the abuser or the perpetrator to actually treat them the way they're treating them. But it's actually the abuser, that has the problem, that is mistreating the victim the way they're treating them. So how they would manipulate the victim is, after they do something wrong, and then maybe the victim is actually like, fed up, and they're on the verge maybe of trying to break the relationship, leave the marriage, leave the connection, maybe move out, whatever it is that they're trying to do. So the perpetrator will try and lead the victim back into his space, so that he can actually keep the victim in the palm of his or her hands by acting like he's going to change, acting like she's going to change, by doing nice gestures, being sweet, just acting as a completely different person to who he or she was when he or she was abusing the victim. So obviously the victim will start then being like, okay, maybe he or she is trying to change, maybe he or she is trying to actually mend things and make things right. So they manipulate, but actually they have hidden agendas towards that. They're just doing it for a short span of time, so that the victim can think that they're trying to change and fix things, but they're not. And then after like maybe a day, a week, they go back to who they are. So that's how they actually manipulate the victim. That's a cycle that is there in a trauma bonding between the victim and the perpetrator. Another thing is, their manipulative tactics, they come in different forms. Sometimes they can say sweet words. Some of them are good with words. They can say a paragraph of nice things, and then automatically the victim is now brainwashed, and they've forgotten about how they were treated. So that manipulative tactic can also cause the trauma bonding to be stronger, and it causes a trauma response towards the victim, because they feel like in order for them to actually get the needs of their own to be met, they need to suffer first. They need to suffer first. And it's wrong, because as a human being, if you're in a connection with someone, whether it's love, whether it's platonic, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's partners, whether it's colleagues, you need to have your own needs met within that connection, as much as the other person needs to have their own needs met. Both of you guys in that connection have to have your needs met. I mean, you can't have one individual in the party have their needs met and then have the other party not have their needs met. It doesn't work like that. Both the parties need to have their needs met. When can trauma bonding start happening? So it can happen in a marriage. It can happen in a child abuse connection. It can happen in incest connection. It can happen in marriage. It can happen in kidnapping. It can happen in human trafficking. So it can happen in different kinds of scenarios, but these are just a few examples in which trauma bonding can happen. So the victim must actually perceive threat from the abuser. So for example, when you get kidnapped, the person that kidnaps you, they provide a form of threat towards you. So at the end of the day, let's say they've kidnapped you for 6 months, you end up having to bow down to them, act nice, be sweet, so that they don't kill you, so that they don't do bad things to you, you know. So it's a form of trauma bonding, because why? You're receiving a threat from the kidnapper. So that's like a situation when the trauma bonding can then start happening. And then another way is it's from experiencing like emotional, physical, mental, psychological, and in an extreme manner, you know, abuse from the perpetrator. That's when the trauma bonding can start happening, because sometimes you reach a point whereby it has happened so many times and so extremely that you end up being numb. You end up being numb and you end up giving in to that treatment that you receive from the perpetrator. And then another way when it can start happening is that the perpetrator can manipulate you so many times that it ends up being a norm, you know, in your life. So that's when the trauma bonding can start happening. Another way is when the perpetrator starts isolating the victim, you know, from the world, from themselves. You know, that's when the trauma bonding can start happening, because why? The victim starts relying on the perpetrator, the abuser, of who they are, how their world is, how they perceive the world, you know, how they think, how they calculate things, how they respond and react to things, you know. And then another way when a trauma bonding can start is when the perpetrator and the abuser actually manipulates the victim, that they cannot escape the situation that they find themselves in. So they make sure that they make them feel trapped every time. That's when the trauma bonding can actually start happening. So signs in which you are actually in a trauma bond, you need to evaluate these different kinds of situations and scenarios, so that you can be able to check if you're in a trauma bonding connection or a trauma bonding situation. Are you always justifying for your abuser? Are you always justifying for your perpetrator, for the actions that they do towards you that are bad, for the mistreatment that they give towards you, the breadcrumbing that they give towards you? Are you always trying to justify the perpetrator and the abuser? That's what you need to ask yourself. Number 2, are you always falling for the trap of the perpetrator? You need to evaluate, like you need to sit down with yourself and look at the situation and think, like, am I always falling for their manipulative tactics? Am I always falling for their sweet, swift words? You know, am I always falling for their, 2 seconds, 2-minute noodles, gestures that they provide towards me, just to brainwash me to think that they're actually going to change, but they don't? That's what you need to actually evaluate and recheck about the situation. Number 3, are you always trying to cover up for your perpetrator? Are you always trying to cover up for your abuser? Whenever they do something bad, let's say maybe they punch you in the face. Let's say you're in a marriage and then the husband punches, the woman in the face. Now they've got a blue eye, and then now they're covering themselves up with makeup. They wear sunglasses. They always go outside on the streets looking normal, like nothing is happening. But behind that mask, there's actually a blue eye. That's physical abuse. So are you covering up for the perpetrator, for the abuser? Another way in which you can evaluate if you're in a trauma bonding is, are you always arguing or distancing yourself from people that are trying to assist you? So whether it's friends, family, colleagues, or maybe authoritative people like policemen and things like that. Are you always trying to distance yourself from people that are trying to assist you? Excuse me. Number 5, do you become defensive when people actually try and assist you? Like, do you want to fight? Do you want to be like, no, I feel like you hate me, I feel like you don't understand. This person is not who you say. Like, are you always just defensive? You need to evaluate that for your perpetrator, for your abuser. Number 6, let's say you are aware of what's happening. Do you find yourself in a situation whereby you delay or you are reluctant to actually removing yourself from that situation that you find yourself in? So these are the signs that you can evaluate to see if you are in a trauma bonding connection. So now we're going to talk about breaking the trauma bond in which you find yourself in. So breaking yourself out of a trauma bond can be very overwhelming. It can be challenging. It's not easy, guys. It's not easy. I know most of you guys that have been through it know exactly what I'm talking about, that it is not easy to break out of a trauma bonding connection situation. Those that are currently in it and you want to get out, it's possible, but it's not going to be easy. And these are the possibilities that you can actually have a look at and start incorporating so that you can break out of it for your own good. Number 1, focus on the present moment. So how can you focus on the present moment? Evaluate the situation that you're in. Go to a quiet place, in nature, outside, go for a walk, sit down. If you're in nature, have a book, have a journal, or you don't have to have a journal, just like be quiet. Don't have your phone, don't be around distractions. Sit down and think, like, this connection that I'm in with my parent, with my partner, with my friend, is it safe for me? Is it toxic for me? Are they abusing me emotionally, mentally, physically? Be real with yourselves. Ask yourselves those deep-rooted questions that you're scared of so that you can pull out the answers and recognize, the reality in which you find yourself in. Then from there, you'll be able to come up with solutions to actually break out of the cycle. Number 2, another way in which you can break the trauma bond is to focus on the evidence. So now that you've evaluated what's happening around you, now you look at the evidence that, okay, on the 6th of May, 2021, this is what he or she did to me. On the 10th of October, 2022, this is what he or she did to me. On the 25th of October, he or she did this to me. Actually record all the incidences, all the situations in which you were abused, you were breadcrumbed, you were treated badly by the abuser. Then once you have the evidence, you'll be able to see clearly, you'll be able to have more awareness, and you'll be more motivated to actually break out of that cycle that you're in. Number 3, practice positive self-talk. Guys, a lot of people look down upon positivity, positive affirmations, positive self-talk. This thing is very important because when you're in a traumatic bond, when you're in a negative situation, in a dark place, what happens is your mind gets filled with like negative talk, dark thoughts, dark cycles and dark patterns of talking yourself out of something that you're supposed to actually get out of. So when you say positive affirmations, when you practice positive self-talk, it helps you stay above the water. It helps you gain motivation, determination, and willpower to actually break out of that cycle, no matter how difficult it is. So practice positive self-talk. And then the 4th one would be self-care. Take yourself out. Go to a spa date. Go to a massage. Go somewhere where you feel like your soul will be rejuvenated. Maybe visit a friend that will make you laugh, friends that will give you advice, a friend that will be a shoulder to cry on, where you'll just cry for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, just releasing, this heavy burden on your heart and the difficulty that you're facing in the situation that you're in, And then another one would be educate yourself. Educate yourself about trauma bonding, guys. There's Google, there's YouTube. Type in how to get out of a trauma bonding connection, and then educate yourself. Trust me, you'll get answers from that. And then, guys, just like safety plans, for when you actually do leave trauma bonds, because the abuser can sometimes be dangerous, especially if they've held you captive for the longest time, whether it's kidnapping, human trafficking, marriage, relationship, family, colleagues, whatever it is that you find yourself in, that is a trauma bond. The perpetrator can be very dangerous, So you need a safety plan. So a safety plan can be maybe moving out of that neighborhood in which you were living, maybe with your partner. Another way would be deleting your numbers, changing your numbers, deleting all your social media, starting a new social media name, starting a new Facebook page, a new Instagram page, having a new number for WhatsApp, for phone calls, just delete, start a new life on social media. That's what you can do. And then what you can do is you can gather evidence of what the perpetrator is doing towards you, and then you can go to the law people, the law enforcement, and then open a lawsuit against them, maybe a protection order, whatever it is that's going to keep you and your family safe. Another way would be just moving in. When you move into a new home, make sure that you've got a security system, you've got padlocks on the gate, dogs, maybe get dogs, pit bulls, Rottweilers, Boerboers, that will keep you safe, away from the perpetrator. So also another thing that I would like to highlight is recovery from actually removing yourself from a trauma bonding connection. When you move yourself out of a trauma bonding connection, there are after effects. At the end of the day, you still care about the person, you still love them, especially if it was a marriage or a relationship. You still care about the person, so you will have temptations to go back to the person. So what you need to do is you need to find yourself a support group of people whereby you will go there maybe 3 times a week, and then share how you feel, share that you're feeling tempted to go back, and then trust me, those people are going to be able to stop you from going back so that you can heal properly and live your life, and be happy. And then what you can do is you can also go to therapy, go to a psychologist, that will help you unpack the trauma in which you experienced in whatever bondage that you had with the perpetrator. So that is it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for the support so far. Please, guys, continue supporting. Please share to someone that you know might need to hear this. Please like, please subscribe. Please share to people to subscribe as well, guys. This is a platform for elevation, for growing, for healing, for just reaching your highest potential, guys, by unpacking and unlearning things in which are not working for us anymore. Love and light. Bye.